and this is Gangster, the story of Viv Graham. Episode 3, Ecstasy and Enemies.
The biggest tune of all was Korea, Let Me Love You for Tonight. That was just one of those tunes people would be taking their pills. It's got that sort of naughty, sexy, ecstasy, everybody having away with everybody else feel to it, you know? It just dominated dance floors. They'd be coming up and they would know it was on. So that was an absolutely massive tune.
From the late 80s, ecstasy and house music were sweeping into Newcastle and transforming the city's nightlife. A revolution was underway, and Tom Colker had a front row seat.
Ecstasy isn't a new drug. It most closely resembles an amphetamine and was first developed in 1914 to suppress...
Police have made the first British seizure of a potentially dangerous drug called ecstasy.
Ecstasy is the drug which everyone is suddenly talking about. But how much do you know about the risks involved?
And afterwards, everyone would go back to somebody's house, and the big sort of chill-out tune was Sweet Harmony by The Beloved. That was a massive tune. You knew when you came out the club, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, in some flat somewhere, where all the gay guys have got string vests on and all the girls are dancing around, everyone's sort of chilling and coming down a bit from all their pills. You just knew that the whole city were all listening to that one record at the same time.
As well as running the Trent House pub, Tom was DJing the gay nights at one of the city's best-known clubs, Rock Shops. And Tom says it was right here that ecstasy first landed in a big way.
When house music arrived, I was, smack in the middle of it, with my foot on the pedal of a rapidly expanding city. And then, you got ecstasy arrived in the sort of, late 80s and boom, it was just insanity.
From a DJ's point of view, though, what did ecstasy do to the club scene?
In the first instance, it made it much better. And it meant that whereas people would come to clubs for music, people started to come to clubs for drugs. And whereas people used to take drugs to enjoy music more, you got the point where people started to make music so people could enjoy drugs more. So it kind of turned round on itself,
The peace and love and sweaty hugs couldn't last, though, because there was serious money to be made.
There was a sort of a period of about 6 months where house music was kicking in and the whole club was just an amazing time. And then after that 6 months, Dorman wised up. You had different families working on the doors of different clubs and they took over the drugs trade. Because in those days, an E was 20 quid. So if you've got 800 people in a club and they're all on E, there's a massive amount of money to be made. I saw some insane violence, absolutely insane violence. And that was a regular thing. You could go to a club, and if you got on the wrong side of the doorman, you could take a beating. And the only reason I never got a beating was because I was so valuable to them, because I was the one who had all the records and I was packing the club out. So I was kind of, oh, Tommy, it's great, good to see you, Tommy, all right, you all right? Yeah, you want a pill? All this, that was where I was at. So I was kind of protected from it, and I had a pretty unique position. I wasn't in the rough and tumble of it. But many people I know, beatings were dished out, and I saw people have their teeth knocked out with chains and stuff, and see the club kick off loads of times, and it was just a crazy time. Now, if you go to the door of a club, you've got a couple of doormen standing there with badges and all wearing black and everything. Back then you had a family, so you'd have like some big old mucklehead steroid brothers and all their little scraggly hangers on and that. And there'd be a great big group of people standing at the door of the club and you didn't know who was doing what. Between sort of 1988 and 93, that was the seismic change in the UK dance music industry and the UK drug industry and the rise of the gangsters in Newcastle.
Beating people up was a regular thing. My partner, he used to take a chainsaw with him. We would terrify people, just close them down.
Meet Chet Sandu.
I was convicted of international drug smuggling. I did a second sentence.
For him, ecstasy was the start of a lot of trouble.
Blackmail, conspiracy to supply.
And a long criminal career.
And extortion. If somebody needs to get seen to, get dealt with, if they've been misbehaving in the nightclubs, what we had control of, and we were doing the doors there, if somebody would come in, take the piss, sell drugs there, we would have to take control of that, go and see them, go get them, beat them up, stab them, slapping people around. We didn't fear anybody. There's nobody who's going to fuck with us. We had that invincibility that no other firm is going to fuck with our firm.
Chet's parents came to the UK from India and moved to Washington outside Sunderland to run a corner shop. Chet started working there as a teenager.
Racism here was rife, and it was like hard work in the shop on a daily basis here. Getting spat on, getting abused. People would just come in and steal blatantly. They would just put a bottle of vodka down their pants, knowing it's just me on their tail. And then I'll say to them, what about the vodka that you've got? And then they'll say, well, I'll come over that counter and jump all over your blackhead if you've got anything to say.
Chet could only put up with this for so long. As he got older, he started going to the gym. He wanted to be able to protect himself in case one of his abusers followed through on their threats. There, he encountered Viv Graham.
I used to see him at the gym. I knew who he was. I knew he was a figure to keep away from, really.
What was his reputation like?
His reputation was that everybody was scared of him. He was huge, massive, friendly to a lot of people. He was good, funny, this, that. He was really, really fucking tough. The bench press he used to do 5 20-kilo plates on each side of the bar, which I've never seen anybody else do. But on top of that, he could box as well. There's never been another figure like him since. Crime families, yes, they're there, but they're everywhere, you know, they're nothing special. But it was just a fact of the power, the presence, the aura, the size of him.
Chet was impressed. Viv looked invincible. Nobody would cross him. And Chet could use a bit of that himself.
Everybody wanted to be like Viv, you know. Viv was massive, he was the man. And I think he set the standards in a way as well for people to start taking steroids. Because people would look at him and think, oh yeah, fucking hell. Okay, and then people tried it.
Can you remember the first time when you started taking them?
With water retention at first, you go big all over. It hits your face as well, hits your neck, hits your stomach, it hits everything. But then if you work on that, train on that, and then you can develop that into a shape. I put on a load of weight, a load of strength as well, but I was taking an immense amount.
Called Substance, ironically, which stocked high-end designer clothes. It was legit and successful to begin with, but the money to be made out of rave was just too tempting. Most of his customers were either wealthy clubbers or criminals who were looking to make a killing out of E. Chet was quickly drawn in.
I got introduced to Ecstasy and things like that because people use my shop to sell tickets to raves. I was their main outlet, and so I started to organise coaches there as well. That was from the shop to wherever we were going, Manchester, Liverpool, London. And then on these coaches, there was a friend of mine. He used to sell all the Ecstasy on the coaches. So it was like a one-stop shop.
Chet was on a slippery slope. Rave and E were just the start. It would lead him to get more deeply involved with the criminal gangs who were flocking to Substance. His trendy shop would later become the centre of a credit card fraud racket and a meeting place for criminals. In the meantime, Chet watched on as crime gangs manoeuvred to capitalise on the rise of Ecstasy. Except, there was someone in the way. Was there a sort of top dog? You know, you think of Newcastle at that time.
The top dog in Newcastle then was Viv. He had everything in control, really. A lot of people weren't really happy about it because he was in charge of a lot of clubs, bars, boozers, where other crime families thinking we could be selling our drugs there. So they were like thinking, well, there's a lot of money that is like missed out on here because the drug market then was huge and everybody wanted a piece of it.
There's something really unique about Newcastle, what doesn't exist anywhere else. Possibly Liverpool, but not so much as Newcastle. The aggression is a lot more intense.
That's Bernard O'Mahony. In the 90s, he was part of the Essex Boys gang, which became infamous when 3 members were found murdered in a Range Rover. These days, he's a true crime author, and Newcastle has kept him busy.
in Manchester, you know, it's an area thing, or lads who go to the same nightclub or whatever. But in Newcastle, they're families. And if you injure one of the Essex boys, you know, they might come back at you. But if you hurt someone's brother or someone's cousin or someone in their family, you know, the repercussion is always twice as serious.
Back in the late 80s, several criminal families were on the rise, but one was emerging top of the pile, the Sayers. Remember John Bryan Sayers, the instigator of the Battle of Percy Street from episode 1?
He had an Alsatian dog with him. They chopped his dog up. They stuck the axe in his head.
He was still on the scene, but now he had his 3 sons, John Henry, Michael and Stephen, to back him up.
The Sayers family are part and parcel of Newcastle's history, really. Their family were always involved in the markets, fruit and veg and all that sort of thing. They were barrow boys. They were the first licensed barrow boys ever to be in Newcastle. And both father and sons alike were all villains involved in armed robbery, blackmail and allegations of murder. The crime that catapulted them into the public spotlight was John Sayers, who is allegedly known as the godfather of Newcastle. He was part of an armed gang which stole 350 grand. The gang was armed with guns, sledgehammers, pickaxe handles, and they forced the staff to lie on the floor while they stole a firm's wages. It sort of rubber-stamped them as major villains in the northeast.
The Sayers had their rivals, and one of them was fellow West End gangster, Paddy Conroy. Paddy would later become Britain's most wanted man after escaping from a prison vehicle on his way to court to face charges of kidnap, false imprisonment and torture. He went on the run in Spain before being captured and convicted. Paddy had got wind that Viv had banned some of his mates from his favourite Italian restaurant, Santino's in the Cloth Market. He didn't like that one bit. Who does this guy think he is? So Paddy and a group of his associates headed to the restaurant to find Viv.
The bouncers have seen him coming, and they're all sort of looking at each other and saying, you know, the Conroys are here, the Conroys are here, trying to group together. And somebody has launched a dustbin lid at the bouncers, and it's missed them and smashed a window. And another associate of Paddy's has set off some sort of alarm, I assume it's a fire alarm or a burglar alarm, in the premises. And there's chaos, there's people running around screaming, customers, and Paddy and them are all, you know, it's a bit of a joke to them, they're all laughing about it. And they sort of run to their car laughing and spin the wheels and drive off as they do, as they do in Newcastle. They're driving up streets the wrong way and through red lights, and the police have naturally spotted them because they're doing this in the middle of the city. And the police give chase.
Police caught Conroy at his house and arrested him in circumstances which were, shall we say, hotly disputed. Conroy was charged with wounding a police officer and possession of a knife, but witnesses in his neighbourhood claimed it was actually the police who assaulted Conroy. When it came to the trial, Conroy and his family were adamant he'd be cleared. They were wrong. He was jailed for 5 years. That sparked a series of protests.
I've got an old photograph, it's quite a thing really. And this photograph I've got shows John Sayers driving a lorry with a banner or a sign on the back saying Paddy Conroy is innocent. So even the Sayers is joined in protesting Paddy's innocence. But there was hundreds of people marched through the streets of Newcastle. His good friend Michael Bullock, known as the Bull, climbed the Tyne Bridge and sat on top of the Tyne Bridge and brought all the traffic in Newcastle to a standstill. It was just a huge thing. There was people wearing Paddy Conroy is innocent t-shirts. I think it's pretty unique.
Conroy's conviction for assaulting the police officer was later quashed at the Court of Appeal, but the possession of a knife, which he also denied, wasn't. On the night Paddy was sent down, his family headed into Newcastle to drown their sorrows.
So his friends and family spent the evening, going pub to pub, having a drink. And when all the pubs closed, they ended up at a nightclub called Julie's. And at the door of this venue, they found Viv Graham. And he was surrounded by a group of, equally big, steroid bloated bouncers. Viv Graham was like one of the most famous bouncers in this country, never mind in Newcastle. Viv pointed out one or two of Paddy's friends and said, you can go in. But he said to Paddy's brother Michael, there's no way you're coming in. Michael took exception to this and said to Viv, you're just a copper. You're a policeman, in other words. So Viv sort of stuck his chest out and said, if you're going to call me a copper, I'm going to fight you and all this. So none of the Conroys are mugs, they're all fighting men. And Michael said, well, OK, let's get started. So they stood in the street outside the club and Michael was smashing Viv and Viv thought he was going to be knocked out at one stage, so he abandoned his boxing skills, grabbed hold of Michael in a headlock and sort of was wrestling with him. And not many men on earth could match the pair of Viv Graham. He was just a machine, do you know what I mean? And Michael had a lot to drink that night. So Viv overpowered Michael, struck him twice in the face, and Michael suffered a broken jaw.
Viv Graham was racking up enemies. Remember, this was an era when a sawn-off shotgun could be bought in a pub along with a joint of bacon.
Do you want to buy some bacon?
Danger was everywhere. Just a month after Paddy Conroy's failed attempt to confront him at Santino's, Viv was back at his favourite Italian. He was there with a friend called Rob Bell. Earlier that evening, Rob had annoyed a city villain. Author Stephen Richards says that villain wasn't going to let it lie.
He loaded his shotgun up and he went back to Santino's about midnight. And he walked up to the table where Rob Bell and Viv Graham were. Out of nowhere, Viv is able to whack that gun and smash it up against the wall. That's how fast it was. This is where somebody other than Viv Graham, just a normal bouncer, would not have reacted. They would have sat there frozen. A fight then ensues. Next thing we know, they're out into a dark alleyway. Viv sees blood coming out of Bell in that lane. Bell had been stabbed through the heart. Now, Viv reacted. He took his jacket off and tried to stem the bleeding as much as he could. Eventually, after a long hospital stay and near death, Rob Bell recovered. And can we attribute that to Viv saving his life? Yes, I would think so, yes.
That incident sounds quite extraordinary. Not only did he disarm a gunman, but he stemmed his mate's blood and saved his life.
This is what sets people like Viv apart from the pleasers and the triers to the Trojans. This is what Viv was all about. This is why people respected him. He could smell out trouble and he could react so fast.
What happened at Santino's restaurant? Did it start spreading around Newcastle?
It spread faster than the River Tyne flows.
A man called Peter Donnelly was later charged with attempted murder, but was acquitted at trial. In 1989, gangland gun crime seemed to explode on the streets of Tyneside. Weapons were freely available and gangsters were quite willing to use them. Even if everyone knew who had done it, nobody would talk. And Viv was a 17-stone target. Rivals had him in their sights and planned a drive-by shooting. He was outside Manhattan's nightclub in the heart of the city when a blue Nissan Bluebird pulled up.
You would think Viv would be aware in that manner that, you know, especially a blacked out windowed, blacked out Nissan pulling up alongside them, that's got to be watched. But no, not on this occasion. And bang, bang, there it went, pump action, straight out of the back windshield. Rob Armstrong was hit with the fragments. Here we have a major shooting in an area in Newcastle that's heavily policed as well because of nightclubs. And there's a heavy population of people who are out enjoying themselves at night, and yet they still did that. So they were able to get hold of a pump-action shotgun and do that.
Normally after a drive-by, you kind of get this escalation of violence, you know, tit-for-tat shootings. That's what you'd expect, but not in Viv Graham's case. Interestingly, he and Rob Bell go to the local newspaper, the Sunday Sun, which I have here, and they call the shooter cowardly scum, who didn't have the bottle to confront them properly. They also criticise the shooter for hitting Rob Bell in his back and while he's on the ground, and say, look, you haven't scared me. And then there's an unnamed police officer quoted in it who warns of serious consequences for gangsters who are running protection rackets.
Viv's partner Anna had been out with him that night. You've been getting death threats, these calls have been happening. Then there's a drive-by where somebody actually shoots at Viv and Rob. What's your feeling about that afterwards?
I always thought he was dead alert. Like he used to say to me, when you drive the car, be very, very careful. Check your mirrors all the time, and I watch if a motorbike comes at the side of you. I just used to think, oh, Viv, be careful where you're going, who you're with.
Viv was right to warn Anna to be careful, because even at home, tucked up in front of the TV watching a film, they weren't safe.
His favourite film was Zulu.
Yeah? Michael Caine, right?
This is a day and night of death and defiance, when 100 gallant men were outnumbered by the mightiest warrior nation on earth.
He watched it that many times he could speak the language. Zulu was what's saying. All our windows got shot in, and we had big thick velvet curtains at the time where they had lining and that, and he had the telly on that full, and he had bang, bang. But the glass didn't kind of come through them big, thick curtains. And so I got up and I thought, wow, what was that? Viv jumped up there and I went, all the windows, and the kids was in bed and everything. So I went to the door and there was 3 big black cars with guns pointing at the door.
Wow, so Anna, so I've got that straight. When your house got shot at, and you and Viv are there, but he's got Zulu on so loud he doesn't even notice.
Even now the windows had been blasted. I opened the door and then I went to go out and like Viv pulled us back in and she slammed the door.
I'd be terrified.
Well, I was terrified. The guns were pointing out of the car window. It was scary.
It wasn't just Viv who was being targeted. That summer, doorman Howard Mills lost part of his leg when he was shot as he left a bar. And Billy Robinson, who had given Viv his break on the doors, was also shot in Gateshead.
Do you think he took it as seriously as you did?
No, I don't think. Because he used to always say, I'll be dead by the time I'm 40. I used to say, no, you'll not. My daddy used to say, always say them daft things like that. You'd say it all the time. And sure enough, he was.
Newcastle's underworld is more volatile than ever. Viv is right in the thick of it, and his next move changes everything. Coming up on Gangster.
Viv Graham jumped up and there were like fury in his eyes, like, you know, he's ready.
He's got a whole gang around him who are shouting, let's open those doors, let's take him out, let's kill him.
I was like a lump of meat to the dogs. Them conspired, in my eyes, to get me murdered so they could get me off the street.
I'm Livy Haydock, and you've been listening